Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the MCQ topic wise chapter 10. And the chapter 10 is infectious diseases. And as requested by many of you, I am coming up with this video so that you can take your exam on the 16th and do well in the paper one. Now, as we look at question number one, some common antibiotics are listed. The action of each antibiotic is described. Rifampicin inhibits RNA polymerase. Human beings also have RNA polymerase. Inhibits 70S ribosome. We in our mitochondria have 70S ribosomes. Inhibits DNA synthesis. We have DNA synthesis in our nucleus as well. So ampicillin inhibits peptidoglycan synthesis. Now, which of these antibiotics will affect the activities of bacterial cells only? The word only has been written in bold. So please remember peptidoglycan is only in bacteria. So that is why the answer is D. Then coming to question number 2. What could cause an outbreak of malaria in a country after it had been eliminated? So malaria is finished in a country. We've got rid of the female Anopheles mosquito. So people are not suffering from malaria. They don't have plasmodium in their blood. Number 1, mosquitoes become resistant to insecticides. Migration of population due to war. Malarial parasite becomes resistant to quinine. Now all the three apply. Because if it had been finished, then now again we've had some other people from some other places have come here and brought the plasmodium in their blood. And then the mosquitoes are also abundant. And the malarial parasite is also being now, the quinine is not working on them. And people are suffering from more malaria. So it was 1, 2, and 3. Then coming to question number 3, which disease is caused by a bacterium and can be spread by airborne droplets? Now, cholera is caused by bacteria, but it is waterborne and foodborne. Measles is a virus. Measles, please remember, has been removed from the syllabus. So it's no longer in the 2022 syllabus. So this is wrong. And smallpox has also been removed. So both these have been removed. So if you're taking the exam in 2022, then you don't need to study measles and smallpox. So the only thing was bacteria, but students taking the November exam will need to know this. Question number 4. Smallpox has been eradicated, but malaria and cholera have not. Again, this is a syllabus for only 2021. Which statement correctly explains this? Cholera pathogen in the intestines are not destroyed by antibiotics. Plasmodium, smallpox has been eradicated, but malaria and cholera have not. So which statement correctly explains this? So cholera pathogen not destroyed by antibiotics. Plasmodium antigens change during the life cycle. Smallpox antigens remain stable. Vaccines only work against viruses. Now the fourth was wrong because vaccines work against viruses and we have a BCG vaccination for tuberculosis as well. So the answer was 1, 2, and 3. 5, weird sort of a question. Which disease is not likely to be passed directly from parent to child? It can't be malaria. Because malaria, the mosquito has to suck the blood and then it has to transfer it, then it remains in its stomach, and then of course it has to suck the blood of another. So how can it be directly from parent to child? It's sort of a little question more checking your English skills rather than biology skills. Why is it difficult to control the spread of measles? It's a global air travel for commerce and tourism has increased. Yes, that's correct. The virus that causes measles rapidly evolves resistance to antibiotics. And that's wrong because viruses are not destroyed by antibiotics. So this was totally rubbish. The virus that causes measles shows great antigenic variability. I mean, no, we've not heard of that. Then civil unrest and poverty resulted in overcrowded living conditions. So it was only 1 and 4 which was correct. And that is why the answer was C. Then question number 7. The table shows the names of 5 pathogens. Which row matches the pathogen with the disease they cause? Morbilli measles, Mycobacterium TB, Plasmodium malaria, smallpox variola, and Vibrio cholera. Smallpox and measles has been removed from the 2022 syllabus. So please remember, those students taking the exam next year, don't do this. Which disease exhibits all the following features? It can be transmitted by animals to other animals, including humans. One mode of transmission is by transfusion with contaminated blood, which is the disease which is found in the blood, and that is malaria, plasmodium. The causative organism can show multiple drug resistance. The majority of humans who die from the disease are children. So the answer to that was malaria, which exhibits all the following features. Then number 9, the proportion of the local population who have malaria in area R is higher than the proportion in area S. Which factor causes the difference? So R has more malaria and S has less malaria and malaria. So area R has a more humid climate than area S. Why? Because there's a lot of standing water. Like after the rains, it becomes very humid. Sewage treatment is not in malaria. Higher population, no, not any difference. Area near the equator means it's more hot, but doesn't mean it's more. The weather is more, cloudy and rainfalls are high. Doesn't mean that. So it had to be A. Now, question number 10. Why is it necessary for a person with a bacterial infection to take antibiotics at evenly spaced time intervals? Like we say, okay, you take ampicillin every 6 hours. And that's a typical that we write as a prescription as doctors. So you'd have to take 4 doses in 24 hours, every 6 hours. So you take one at 6, then you take one at 12, and then you take one at 6 again in the evening, and then you take again at 12 at night. Now, why do you do this? You do this is so because you see after some time that antibiotics is removed in your system, either in the urine or in some other mechanism, it is destroyed. So the reason is to maintain a concentration of antibiotic in the body which is lethal to the bacteria. Because if you take it, say, once in the morning and the effect wears off by 6 hours, then some bacteria will die, but the others will keep on multiplying. So you can't afford that. So you have to maintain a concentration of it. So every 6 hours you give it so that then it is maintained, and you say, okay, take this antibiotic every 6 hours for 5 days or 7 days. And that is to ensure that all the bacteria are destroyed. Now, why was A wrong to increase the concentration of antibiotics slowly? Well, how would you mean every 6 hours slowly? What does that mean? That means it stays in the system. No, it doesn't stay in the system. It is, in fact, removed from the system. To prevent the development of resistant strains of bacteria, that would happen if you stop the antibiotic. Like the doctor says, take it for 5 days, and then you take it for 2 days, and then you stop taking it, and then when you're again sick after 20 days, again you take the antibiotic. Then resistant strains will develop. To select and kill the resistant strains of bacteria, no, that's also wrong. How can it select and kill the resistant strains? Once the resistant strains are developed, the antibiotic is not going to work. Then it says which statement is correct for a neutrophil. Now, this is maybe a chapter from the other chapter. They can leave the blood and can accumulate at the sites of inflammation. So this was the answer to this. What describes artificial passive immunity? I'm sorry, some of the questions are from the immunity chapter. Artificial passive immunity is when protection against a pathogen by an injection of ready-made antibodies. So there is this virus and it has this pathogen. Artificial passive immunity means that you have made these antibodies against it somehow artificially, and now you are giving them these antibodies. Artificial passive immunity. The natural passive immunity is mother to fetus or mother to infant in breast milk. So now what you've done is you've produced these antibodies in millions and you've injected this into the person, and this is called artificial passive immunity, and it's short-lived because your lymphocytes have not made these antibodies. They are ready-made. We've got them somehow made in the lab and we are just injecting them into you. So if that virus has entered your system, then these antibodies will attach to it and destroy it. So that is called artificial passive immunity. The graph shows the fall in cases of tuberculosis in a country between 1910 and 2000. So you see this is 1910 and this is 2000, and you see they are the number of cases per year is falling. Which factors have contributed to the fall over this period? Pasteurization of milk, the provision of new housing, chemical treatment of sewage. Sewage has nothing to do with tuberculosis. Identification of contacts of people infected with TB. So it was 1, 2, and 4. Sewage has nothing to do with tuberculosis. Please remember that. That's cholera. Which is row is correct for cholera? Nature of the disease infectious. Method of transmission waterborne and foodborne. And causative agent is a species of Vibrio cholera. Which statements about people infected with HIV/AIDS are correct? They can be treated and completely cured. No. It's a virus disease. We still haven't discovered something to kill viruses. Antiviral drugs have not been found. That's why we're all suffering from the coronavirus. They may live for many years after infection. They will have symptoms. So it says which statements about people infected with HIV are correct? No, they go on to a symptomless stage. So the answer was only 2 only, because if they had symptoms, then they wouldn't survive. They would sort of be sick all the time, but they're not sick. They get better and then they again get sick, and they have these total times in which they are free of the disease, but the disease is still there. The statements referred to polio and tuberculosis. Macrophage presents antigen vaccines to stimulate an immune response. The TB antigens necessary to produce an immune response are proteins which would be digested in the stomach and small intestine. There are no B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes in the stomach. Which explains why polio vaccine can be taken by mouth, but TB vaccine has to be injected. Why polio vaccine can be taken by mouth? The reason is 2 only. Why? The TB antigen necessary to produce an immune response are proteins, which would be digested in the stomach and the small intestine. But maybe the polio one does not. That is why you take it in the form of drops. Question number 17. Which explains why sickle cell anemia has not been eradicated. Sickle cell anemia is a genetic disorder. So sickle cell anemia is an inherited disease, so vaccination is not possible. How can you get vaccination against something which is not caused by a pathogen? Sickle cell anemia is caused because of a genetic disorder. It is present in the zygote, so the human being that develops from the zygote is going to have these issues. He or she is going to be suffering from the disease sickle cell anemia. So vaccination is only for those in which we have a pathogen involved. In sickle cell anemia, inherited condition, there's no pathogen involved. Question 18. The malarial parasite Plasmodium infects red blood cells and breaks down hemoglobin. Free heme groups are toxic to Plasmodium, and the parasite converts them into non-toxic crystalline hematozoan using an enzyme HDP, which is found in all species of Plasmodium. What will be the long-term result of giving patients with malaria a drug which inhibits HDP? Slower reproduction of all species of Plasmodium in infected red blood cells. Why? Because the question is telling you that Plasmodium infects red blood cell, breaks down hemoglobin. Then the free heme groups are toxic to the Plasmodium. And the Plasmodium and the parasite converts them into non-toxic crystalline hematozoan using an enzyme HDP. But if we give them a drug which inhibits HDP, then of course what is going to happen is that all the species of Plasmodium will have a slower rate of reproduction, because the non-toxic part will not be made. The parasite makes them into the toxic heme group. The free toxic heme group converts them into non-toxic. But when the HDP is not going to work, then the toxic is going to be removed, so the Plasmodium is going to be reproducing much slower. Question 19. Newborn babies have natural passive immunity. What is the correct explanation for this? When a newborn baby is born, they get ready-made antibodies from their mother. Ready-made antibodies from their mother. So the immunity is not inherited in their genetic coding or in their chromosomes. So it's not inherited. What is the correct explanation for this? So, number one, immunity is not inherited. Number two, antibodies are broken down. Natural passive immunity. Please remember, in natural passive immunity, it's a very short while, 6 to 7 months or 6 to 9 months that the baby gets this. Because ultimately the antibodies will be broken down because they have not been made by the baby's lymphocytes. They've been made by the mother's lymphocytes. And very soon the baby's lymphocytes detected that this is not their own protein, it's non-self. So they'll destroy these antibodies. But it's a short-term immunity which the baby gets. Which is a correct description of different types of immunity. Natural active, natural passive, artificial active, artificial passive. Now the answer to this is B because I would have detected it from this one. Natural passive is the placenta story. Antibodies cross the placenta. That was the only correct answer to this. The rest was all rubbish. Natural active, memory cells form. Artificial active, we inject the antigens like in the polio vaccine. Then artificial passive is the injection of tetanus. So you inject antibodies. Then question number 21. Which row shows the effects of chronic bronchitis? Sorry, that's another question of gas exchange. Which row shows the effect of chronic bronchitis? Now, the answer to this was, as it says in the exam report also, majority candidates knew that the lymph nodes would be swollen. Just over half knew the alveoli would be damaged. So lymph glands swollen and alveoli would be damaged. So the rest is bronchi scarred and infection would of course be present. Chronic bronchitis mean long-term bronchitis, but this is a very old paper, so it may not be valid for the present syllabus. Then question number 22. Then question 22, a country had fewer than 2.5 deaths per 100,000 people from TB in 1 year, and the next year they rose to 25 deaths per 100,000. So that is from 2.5 went up to 25. So that means TB is increasing. What may have contributed? Decrease in contact traces, increase in refugee camps. Sewage is not something to do, it's only to do with cholera. So that was out of the picture. So 3 was wrong. Well, that was very easy. This was 3, this was 3, this was 3. So all these 3 are wrong. Now you could figure it out why A was correct. Sewage is only to do with cholera, never to do with TB or any other disease. Question 23. A graft of tissue such as skin from a different person is usually rejected by the body. Which statement about graft rejection is correct? Why is a graft rejection? Why? Because the graft is rejected by the T lymphocytes because they circulate in the blood and can gather at the graft site. Why is there rejection? There has to be something which causes rejection. Question 24. Which row is correct? Disease, cholera, causative agent, bacterium, method of infection, ingestion, food, and waterborne. HIV is not waterborne, that's wrong, rubbish. Malaria is not only by blood transfusion, it's because of the female Anopheles mosquito, which is a vector. And tuberculosis is not a virus, it's a bacterial disease. TB, B for bacteria. Question 25. Which of the diseases listed in the table are only treatable using antibiotics? Antibiotics are only given in bacterial diseases. Now, if you know this chapter, only then you can do this. TB is a bacterial disease and cholera is a bacterial disease. Measles is a viral disease. That's why the answer, this was correct and this was correct. So the answer is B. The diagram shows properties of diseases. Which area of the diagram shows the properties that are common to both cholera and tuberculosis? So the fact that it is bacterial, both are bacterial diseases and both are infectious. So that's why the answer was A. It is not transmitted by airborne droplets, it's only TB is transmitted by airborne droplets, not cholera. So when you have these Venn diagrams, you've got to understand which two circles overlap. So A was the answer, was bacteria and infectious. Bacteria and infectious was the common thing. It says which set of reasons correctly identifies the problems associated with the planning vaccination programs to eradicate other diseases. Disease smallpox has been eradicated. Now, TB, malaria, sickle cell anemia, and cholera. Well, of course, I would have sort of figured this out because this was the answer to this one. And cholera invade gut cells where immune system less effective. So this was the answer. Different stages of different antigens invade body cells and different vaccines needed for active and dormant forms. Smallpox has been removed from the 2022 syllabus. Then coming to the 28th question, and we come to the last question now. What are the causative agents of cholera, malaria, and TB? Cholera is a bacterium, malaria is a protoctist, and TB is a bacterium. This other was all rubbish. TB is not a virus. So if you know this, then you know it. Virus nahi hai, virus nahi hai. And malaria is not caused by an insect, it's caused by the protoctist. Insect is the vector of it. 29th and the last question. 40% of the world's population live in an area where malaria is a threat to health. In recent years, there have been many more cases in Africa. What is the social factor that is letting the spread of malaria get out of control? Social factor. Social factor means migration of people because of wars. So that finishes this video on infectious diseases. I'm sorry, but there are a few questions which are from immunity. And I'll try to restrict it to this chapter, but I've not been able to do that. And there'll be another video following on immunity. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all the very helpful comments which help me to do more videos, and I can then understand what your problems are, and I hope this is going to be now another helpful exercise.